and into tomorrow. Let's go to Johannesburg now, the legal journalist Karyn Maughan there. Karyn, good evening to you and thank you for your time tonight. There's this huge bill from a private hospital from the former president. Why has Correctional Services now been handed this bill?
Well, according to the spokesperson who I spoke to, he said that it was because the former president was in the care of the Department of Correctional Services, and that at this point there were discussions over whether the department would in fact pay that bill, given, as he put it, the privileges that attach to a former head of state. We must remember that the medical care of former presidents, former and current presidents, are all taken care by military health services. So at this point, Stephen, we don't really know why the former president was not taken to a military health facility or to a state facility. In the normal course of events, inmates within correctional services facilities are always taken to state hospitals unless they can actually finance private hospitalization for themselves through their own funding. So it's unclear, in these particular circumstances, why those kind of typical patterns weren't followed, but the version of events that's been put forward by the Department of Correctional Services seems to suggest that they did so because he is the former president.
This bill, just under 400,000 rand, is this going to be the end of it? I mean, he's on medical parole, so he's no longer legally, as I understand it, in the custody of Correctional Services, although he remains in the same hospital. Or could that bill actually go up?
That seems to be the suggestion from Correctional Services. They said, he remains hospitalized as we speak. And so the spokesperson actually saying to me yesterday that that bill may very well increase. And of course, we will expect some further questions from the department to the Department of Correctional Services if indeed they elect to pay it, given that there is no kind of precedent for that funding of private hospitalization by the department. We know, for instance, with, amongst other people, Angelo Agrizzi and I think Clive Darby-Lewis at one stage receiving private health care, but that was fully funded for by themselves. Of course, the department, as I said earlier, very much adamant that because Jacob Zuma is a former president, he may get certain privileges in relation to private hospitalization, but not, able at this point to refer me to legislation that would potentially justify that.
There's still huge questions about the actual decision to give the former president medical parole. Is this just politicians being politicians, opposition parties being opposition parties, or is there something deeper to it? It seems that we're not yet clear on exactly how this decision was made.
I think there seems to be strong indications at this point, articulated by, amongst other people, the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, that the Medical Parole Advisory Board, which is intended to form a very integral part of any decision with regard to medical parole, may very well have refused to grant the former president medical parole. We don't know on what basis that happened. Certainly when I spoke to its chairperson, she referred all queries to Arthur Fraser and wouldn't answer any questions about the recommendation. But I think given the fact that the Department of Correctional Services up until very recently was quite open about why they believed this decision was lawful, the fact that they have refused to answer any questions as to what the board's recommendation was in relation to the former president arguably is quite telling. It's important to remember, Stephen, that under the law, you can only grant someone medical parole within very strict legal confines. Either they're terminally ill, they're incapacitated, physically unable to move, or they are unable to take care of themselves. And my understanding is that the advisory board may have had fundamental difficulties in the particular circumstances of that case in finding those factors to be relevant to the former head of state. So, there is now litigation that is going to be launched by the DA. The full records, all the things that, came before Arthur Fraser when he made this decision will now be part of a so-called Rule 53 record, which may or may not be limited to some degree. But certainly this issue of what exactly the parole board, the medical parole board advised in these circumstances is going to be key here. And of course, it's important to remember that that very board came into existence after the Shabir Sheikh medical parole scandal where the former president's former financial advisor was given medical parole in circumstances where he was alleged to have been terminally ill, and as we all know, is currently being spotted at golf courses around the country in full vigor and health. And that seems to have informed a lot of the public distrust that seems to be manifesting itself even today around this potential politicization of the medical parole process.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this is what hangs over the whole thing, isn't it? There should be a shaky example. Medical parole, 15 years ago now, I think it was, a long time ago. And so that is the problem. That's what really colors or, I suppose, filters. Everybody is thinking about that decision when it comes to former President Jacob Zuma.
The other difficulty, of course, is that for many other people, medical parole is a far more difficult process. I mean, I was looking at a court judgment today about a matter involving someone who was convicted of armed robbery, who had leukemia, where the medical parole board, in fact, found that he should receive medical parole, and that was denied, overturned by the National Commissioner at the time. And he had to bring an urgent application and was, released by the court. And on the day of the delivery of the judgment explaining why, he died. We know that there are a number of people that, I'm trying to get statistics on them at the moment, but, allegedly, hundreds of people potentially who have died in custody while trying to obtain medical parole or in severely compromised states of health. So the argument can be made that, this is again a manifestation, while indeed the former president may indeed have significant medical issues, and that will be decided and ventilated in court potentially, in the following weeks. There does appear to be a significant inequality in the treatment of people who have allegiance to the ANC, who are high-placed officials within those structures or linked to high-placed officials, and the ordinary inmate who often dies behind bars while desperately trying to be released.
Karyn Maughan, thanks very much indeed. Legal journalists do appreciate the time, of course, more coverage on the former president as we go into tomorrow.